Hello and welcome to the channel. On today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut and sew a conical corset with a structured peplum, and also how to cut and sew a basic skirt pattern. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button. So let's dive right into today's video. So here I've marked out all my basic measurement, which includes my shoulder to bust, under bust, and my top length. And also on this pattern, I went ahead to cut out my neckline of 3 by 3.5 inches. So if you don't know how to draw out your neckline and your chest line, in my videos I normally do this, and you can go ahead to check that out. So now I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 divided by 2. I have 3.5. Now my top length is 22, but when I was drafting the pattern, I went ahead to extend it with 1 inch. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'll connect and rule a line connecting to all those marks that I've made. That's my nipple to nipple divided by 2. Next is to divide my shoulder into 2, and I'm going to go ahead to place my ruler and I'll connect it back. So now the next step we're going to take is to mark our dart intake of 1 inch. For a plus size, go ahead and use 1.5 inches. So I'm making use of a straight dart, which is easier for a beginner to work with. Now I'm going to connect all the lines down, and after that I'm going to go ahead to place my French curve, connecting from the bust line down to the under bust line. On the other side, I'm going to place my French curve and I'm going to connect from the under bust down to the bust of my pattern. Now the next step is to go ahead to measure 1.5 or 2 inches depending on where you want your cup to start. For me, I'm using 1.5 inches. Now I'm going to go ahead to go in by ½ inch from my chest line, because what we have at the thumbnail is not too deep, and I'm going to connect it from my under bust down to the chest line. Go ahead also and mark your dart intake of 1 inch or 1.5 if you're on the plus size, or you can go ahead and calculate that. I have a video on how to calculate that up on the channel. Now I'll go ahead to connect the other side. After doing that, the next step is to go ahead to place your French curve or use your freehand sketch to connect your cup down to your chest line this way. And this is what I have at this point, and I'll go ahead to use my marker to outline it to make it more visible for you to see. And I'll also go ahead to make use of my marker to outline the other part of the corset. After this, we're going to work on the cup. What I have between the armhole and my bust circumference, I'll divide it into 2, place my French curve, and I'll go ahead to connect. So you can also go down by your chest line by ½ inch, or you can just place your French curve and connect it down to that part this way. So this is what I have on my cup part, and I'll connect my yoke and label my cup. The next thing is to insert our body measurement. Now to insert our body measurement at the bust or chest line, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, measure these 2 inches that we have here, and I'll go ahead to mark. So after that, I'll go ahead to extend my line, and I'll extend it down to my bust line, because what you have on the bust is what you have on the chest line. I'll also mark my under bust circumference divided by 4. So at this point, I noticed that this dart intake is not actually 2 inches. So what I will do is just to go ahead to adjust it back. I'll go ahead and measure the dart intake, and after adjusting it, I'll just replace the 2 inches and measure back what I have, and I just have that exact 7 inches. So I'll replace the 2 inches back and mark my sewing allowance of 2 inches. So actually, when drafting out this pattern, I used 2 inches sewing allowance, but I'm still going to reduce it because this pattern needs lesser allowance. Now I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4, and I'll go ahead also to reduce the dart intake. I guess I didn't mark it very well at this point, so I'm just going to go ahead to take it out. I want to make sure that whatever I have is the 2 inches, so that my pattern won't be bigger than my actual measurement. So after taking it out, I'll measure the dart intake, and I'm going to go ahead to replace it and add my sewing allowance. Now at the hip point, I'm going to mark the hip circumference divided by 2, then measure this dart intake and I will replace it. So I'll go ahead and mark the sewing allowance of 2 inches, but in this pattern I'm not supposed to make use of a sewing allowance that much, maybe half or 1 inch, which I'll go ahead and reduce later. But before doing that, I'll go ahead and connect from my pattern from the under bust to the bust, and from the bust down to the waistline, and I'll place my French curve and I'll go ahead to connect. Next we'll go over to the yoke part of this pattern. Now to work on the yoke part, I'm going to go ahead to measure 1 inch inwards. From that point, I'll place my tape and I'm going to measure about 2 inches from that point. Now I'll connect my pattern going to the center. After connecting my pattern going to the center, the next thing I'll do is to go ahead and measure another 1 inch and come in by 1.5 inches from this side. You can as well use 2 inches. After doing that, I'll place my tape back, go up by 2 inches. So from this point, I'll use a freehand sketch to connect the marks that I made at the lower part. So I'm going to outline it, and this is what the yoke pattern of this dress looks like. And after that, I'll go ahead to work on the lower part of the dress, which is the conical effect of this corset. So at the hip points, I'm going to extend my tape about 3.5 or 4 inches, because looking at the thumbnail, what we have is more like a peplum and also a conical effect. So I'm going to place my ruler and I'll connect, but after this we're still going to shape it out, so there's no need for panicking. And even when you're cutting it, even if it doesn't turn out the way you want, you can go ahead to shape it. So now looking at my pattern, I have lines already. So I was recording and my camera stopped, so I had to go ahead and clean it out and start afresh. So after drawing that out, you're going to place your tape and you're going to go ahead and come up by 2 inches. So from that 2 inches point, you can make use of 1.5 inches. I'm going to connect it down to my pattern this way. So watch me while I do that. So after I'm done cutting out, this is what I have, and I'll go ahead to outline my pattern. So while cutting out this pattern, I went ahead to shape out a little on this part of my pattern so that it's going to match what we have on this point. So when I was done cutting, actually I added like 1 inch underneath it. It wasn't giving me the effect I wanted at the lower part of this dress. So at this point, if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for always supporting my channel. So after I'm done cutting out my corset pattern, this is the final look of my corset. So just like I said, I was going to go ahead to take out 1 inch from the sewing allowance because I added 2 inches. So I'll go ahead to join here because I will be using it to cut the back pattern. So before doing that, I'll go ahead and take out about 1 inch from my sewing pattern. So because I don't want to use much allowance on this pattern, so that by the time I turn with 1/2 inch and stitch it by the side, I'll just be left with 1/2 inch. It's easier to join this pattern this way than to have much allowance. So for the sewing allowance I added at the hip points, I'm not going to take it out because of the hip effect we have at the conical effect we have at that point. So while sewing it, if it's not giving me what I want, I'm just going to go ahead to trace it out. Now I'm going to connect and I'm going to blend in the lines. Moving over to the back pattern, I've gone ahead to cut it out just like we did in the front pattern. Now I just marked out the neckline, the armhole, just like we did. What I'm going to do is to use the front pattern to cut the back pattern. And now I'm going to place my pattern starting from the chest line area of this pattern. This is just to make it easier for you to trace out without coming to plot your pattern. So I'll go ahead and I'll place my front pattern touching the chest line, and I'll go ahead to trace out. So after I'm done doing this, the next step is just to go ahead to pin my pattern, and I'm going to trace out the shape I have for the back pattern. Remember, this back pattern does not have a zipper allowance at all, and I'm just going to go ahead to trace out the shape that I have on this part and on the waistline and on the body. So after I'm done tracing down to the chest line, so I notice that my back pattern is seated at the back. I'll still trace it out, that is not a problem, and I'll go ahead to trace out my chest line area. Go down by ½ inch because I don't want the back pattern at the lacing bar be popping up, and I'll go down by 1 inch, mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, and also mark it at this point. I'll go ahead and use my marker to connect at that point. After I'm done connecting, I'm just going to go ahead to connect it back. This is the yoke of the back. I'll come up by 0.25 inches and I'll go ahead to connect. Now I'm going to be marking the lacing bar area, and I'll come in by 1.5 inches. This is not a standard. You can go ahead to make use of 2 inches or more, or you can even use lesser if you don't want it to be too revealing. So now I'm just going to go ahead to trace out the back pattern of this dress. So if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and also follow me on my second channel, which is Draft with Maki. So this is the back pattern. So going back to the front pattern, all I'm going to do is to add a pattern paper underneath it and add about 1 inch, and I will trace it out because what I have is not giving me exactly what I have on the thumbnail. So I'll go ahead to trace it out. And moving over to the skirt pattern, this is an old skirt pattern that I have, and I'm going to be using it for this pattern. Now I'll place my tape and I'll go ahead to get the full length of my skirt, and after that I'm going to go ahead to add 2 inches folding allowance. So my shoulder to waist is 17 inches. So to do that, I'll place my tape at that 17 inches and mark where my skirt stopped, and I'll be adding 2 inches folding allowance to it, and after that I'll go ahead to rule a line at that point. So I'm going to go ahead to write this as skirt length and folding allowance. At the upper part, I'll go ahead to mark my waist circumference divided by 4, which is 17. Add my sewing allowance to that. Now when I'm cutting out my pattern, I'll be adding my dart allowance. Just like I said, this is an old pattern, and I'll go ahead to place and mark my hip point, which is 7 inches away from your waist. For a much taller person, you can use 8 inches. So after doing that, I'm going to go ahead to mark my hip circumference divided by 4. My hip is 10 plus my sewing allowance on that point, which is 1.5, making it 11.5. So whatever I have on this hip point, I'll be minusing it to mark at the lower point, but before that I'll connect it to my waistline. So at the lower part, you can go ahead and minus 2 inches or 1.5 inches from your actual hip length. This is just to give your skirt a fitted effect at the lower part. And now I'm going to use my marker to connect. After connecting that, my skirt pattern is ready, and when I'm cutting out the skirt, I'll be adding my dart intake of 1 inch. Just like I said, this is an old pattern I have already in the house, and I'm going to make use of it to cut out my skirt. Now I'll be cutting out my skirt. Now to cut the back pattern, I'm just going to add a zipper allowance to it. So with that, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and join us in our next video. Thanks.